Good morning again. I told you yesterday that I was going to double up on some comments on 1 Corinthians 8, 1 through 3 in light of the present situation that is going on around us. It's important that you would watch that video before you watch this one in case you just jumped to this part 2. I want to read to you again 1 Corinthians 8, 1 through 3. Now concerning food offered to idols, we know that all of us possess knowledge. This knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. If anyone imagines that he knows something, he does not yet know as he ought to know. But if anyone loves God, he is known by God. Yesterday, I highlighted the fact that sometimes we speak out as though we know when in fact we don't know. And I mentioned the historical background about Gnosticism in this text, and how this issue, food offered to idols, I didn't talk a lot about that, but food offered to idols was really a major issue of conscience and a major issue of discrepancy at Corinth. And it's in this context that Paul is addressing the fact that the Corinthians were giving into a little bit of early Gnostic ideas when they're saying that, hey, we're all in the know, and we function in our knowledge, and that allows us to transcend and arrive at a new spiritual state. And so in that way, we get to speak into all these issues and use our freedom in a particular way and act out in a particular way because we have knowledge. And that's why the text puts all of us possess knowledge in quotes, because Paul is quoting the Corinthians in a slogan that they used. But Paul's concerned that they're using their knowledge to abuse another, even when their knowledge is not real knowledge, as he points out in verse 2, when he says, if anyone imagines that he knows something, he does not yet know as he ought to know. I want to read to you a different version of this, and it's a paraphrase, kind of a paraphrastic translation that Eugene Peterson did called The Message. But the way he words things, I find, is a helpful piece, and I'd like you just to listen as I read it. The question, Peterson says, keeps coming up regarding meat that has been offered up to an idol. This is how he translates it. Should you attend meals where such meat is served or not? We sometimes tend to think we know all we need to know to answer these kinds of questions, but sometimes our humble hearts can help us more than our proud minds. We never really know enough until we recognize that God alone knows all. I mentioned yesterday that it's okay to say you don't know, and it's dangerous to speak like you know when you don't know. Part of knowledge is in fact, I'll say it this way. I think where knowledge and love merge is the idea of empathy. And empathy is where I begin to understand what it is for someone to suffer, and I exercise compassionate love to them out of that knowledge. So again, let me read to you verse 1. Now concerning food offered to idols, we know that all of us possess knowledge. This knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. A number of years ago, my sister-in-law died suddenly in her sleep. I found her, passed away. I had to let my in-laws know, and I had to let my wife know. I'm an only child. I've never had a sibling. I can't understand the angle, the texture, the aspects of that pain. I don't know what it was like to grow up with a peer in my home who shared those kinds of memories that siblings share. I just didn't have that. So when my wife talks to me about her sister, I want to learn what it is to empathize. I want to learn what it is to feel the way she feels from her situation, from her life experience, from what it was to have a sister, from what it was to love her, from what it was to walk with her, from what it is now to walk without her. I need to feel into that. And if I don't have love, and if I don't acknowledge my lack of knowledge, I'll never get there. I'll never get there. And frankly, with a lot going on in our country right now, we have people of color that we know, those of us who are white, and there's just stuff we don't know. You can't read historical pain. You can't read present pain in a history book or in a present book. I mean, you can read about it, but you can't feel it. You need to be able to just stop and let love lead. Paul is making this point. And you might say, hearing this, and go, well, Bryan, I feel like you're ripping this out of context. No, I'm using it as an analogy. The timeless principle of this text holds true. If all you're going to do is act like you know something, even though you don't really know, and you don't have love, then you're just going to tear people apart. Love builds up. Knowledge that is cast as knowledge, but is only a little part of the big picture, ends up becoming a hammer that bludgeons people who are already vulnerable. Again, I really want to challenge you. Think through what you say. Think through how you say it. Sometimes you need to sit and let love, and knowing that you don't know, just sit in empathy for a little bit. Not make a lot of excuses, not make a lot of caveats. Just sit with that as it regards your neighbor. I actually think it's a good time for those of us who are white to sit in this framework with our friends who are people of color. And if that makes you bristle, if that makes you feel like something's wrong, or the pastor's gone liberal or something like that, I think you need to hear what Peterson said again in the Message, when he says we sometimes tend to think we know all we need to know to answer these kinds of questions, but sometimes our humble hearts can help us more than our proud minds. May God help us today.